everybody, Fiber Spider back again in the kitchen. Yes, it is time for another tasty treat for you. Yes, hello. Hope all of you are doing really well today. Today we are going to be making a dessert staple. We're going to be making chocolate chip cookies. Oh yes, they are so delicious. Now I know what you're probably thinking. I thought it too. Yes, everybody has a chocolate chip cookie recipe, right? Well, yes, there are a million different variations out there, and each one has its own unique sort of je ne sais quoi appeal, whether you're in the mood for, double chocolate trouble or, butterscotch or peanut butter or, something that's really crunchy or really soft or etc., etc. These, I would say, are, typical chocolate chip cookies. They have, a little bit of crispiness on the edges. They got a nice chew on the inside, and they are absolutely delish. And I've made these now, I want to say, between 3 and 6 times already, and they are awesome. And the yield, oh my gosh, makes about 5 dozen. Now, we will get into this later, but there are ways that you can, circumvent having, ending up with 5 dozen cookies. Yes, I know that that's a lot, but they are absolutely delightful, and my coworkers cannot get enough of them. And that's why I'm making them right now, because tomorrow I'm going to be bringing some in. So, without further ado, let's get started, shall we? Hello again. Okay, so we're going to start with the dry ingredients, and we're going to do them in separate bowls. So I have the slightly smaller of the 2 bowls here, and we're going to get into the dry ingredients. And of course, I'm also going to have the ingredients listed in the description box down below. Now, that being said, I'm going to start off with some flour. 3 cups. This is all-purpose flour. Level off the top. Generally, I do not go by grams or ounces, or I just do, basic measurements like this. And I've had pretty good results. So that's 2. And 1 more. Okay, and 3 cups. Okay. Next up, some baking soda. And yes, there is a difference between baking soda and baking powder. So we're going to do 1 teaspoon of baking soda. There we go. And then half a teaspoon of baking powder. I love the little level thing on here, I tell you. Okay, so half a teaspoon baking powder. And 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. You're probably thinking, that's a lot. Actually, the salt makes a big difference, because too much, you end up with a salty cookie. But, this is, I think, just the right amount. Now, keep in mind, I am using kosher salt. The grains are bigger. If you use a teaspoon of iodized salt, the grains are smaller. So I would say if you're using iodized, probably use half a teaspoon. Okay, just putting it out there. Okay, there we are. And then for our chocolate chips and add-ins. Now, so here I have a 10-ounce bag of dark chocolate chips, 60% cacao. I go with the Walmart store brand. And I just throw in the whole bag. Get out. There we go. Okay, and then last but not least for the dry ingredients, I got chopped, they say chopped pecans, but honestly, I think that it was a little bit, that the pieces were too big, so I put them through the food processor a little bit to make them a little bit finer because the cookie scoop that I use is fairly small. So, that being said, made it just, a little bit finer. I didn't want dust, but I did want them to be finer. And so roughly about a cup of chopped nuts. Just gives the cookies a little bit of character. Now you could use walnuts, or I've done almonds, sliced almonds a bunch of times, and the overall review on those was very favorable. So I would say, have fun, go crazy. Okay, and that, my dears, is the end as far as the dry ingredients goes. Now I'm just going to mix this up a little bit, get things a little bit more homogeneous. Okie dokie. And now on to the wet ingredients. Hello. All right, so I also started to preheat my oven to 375 degrees because it's going to take a little bit to get this going. Now you could make the process easier for yourself by using a stand mixer. I don't believe in using the easy way out if it means having even more cleanup. So, I'm going to be doing this by hand. So, going to start off with a cup of granulated sugar, just regular white sugar. There we are. And then we need a cup of light brown sugar. Packed, of course. And this is, of course, one of the really messy parts. Can we make it with just this one bag? I don't know. A bit more. Whoa, okay. I think I overdid it just a wee bit, but you know what, that works. Okay, so 1 cup light brown sugar. Clean this up just a little bit. Okay, give me 1 moment. And yes, I will be cleaning down the counters afterwards. And I already did beforehand too. Okay, and then going to add in 2 sticks of unsalted butter. And these are soft. Now you don't want to put them in the microwave because you don't want the butter to be melted, but you do want the butter to be really soft so that you can cream together the butter and the sugar without too much difficulty. Now if you're using a stand mixer, you won't have a lot of difficulty, but since I'm doing this by hand, well, softer is better. There we go. So, just a matter of mixing the butter and the sugar together until it's fairly homogeneous. Now, yes, this will take a bit of doing, and it's also at this point that you want to try to work out any potential lumps in your brown sugar, because invariably there will be lumps. And for those of you wondering, what are you doing? Why don't you just use a stand mixer? Well, you know, yeah, I could, but out of all the times that I've made these, I've gotten nothing but rave reviews and compliments. So apparently I must be doing something right. Let me grab this, scrape down the sides, and keep going. And also, we're going to be adding a few other wet ingredients, which will also help this come together even further. You know, right now, this is kind of early days. I suppose if you have a potato masher, that might work out well as well. Okay, I think we are essentially good. I mean, it's not creamed and frothy and so forth. I understand that, but for our purposes, I think we're good for now. So then we're going to add 2 eggs. I already cracked these. And a little bit of vanilla extract, 2 teaspoons. And if I didn't say it, those are 2 eggs that I put in. So 2 teaspoons of vanilla. 1 and 2. And this will definitely help with making the wet mixture a little bit more fluid, if you will. Okay. Break up those yolks just a little bit. Yeah, see, here we go. Now it's starting to do what it needs to do. And you just want to make all of this really nice and smooth and homogeneous. Lovely. You can see a couple of little lumps here and there. Not a huge ordeal. I suspect that that was a little brown sugar lump. Okie dokie. So I think we are essentially good. And then we can get on into incorporating the two together and getting our cookie dough exactly where we need it to be. Okay, so we already did the dry ingredients. We already did the wet ingredients. Now we're going to mix them both together. Now the reason why I used the larger bowl for the wet ingredients is because we're going to pour the dry into it. So there is a method to my madness. Okay, so just going to pour all this in. There we go. And incorporate. And at first, you're probably going to say to yourself, there's no way that that is all going to mix in. Trust me, it does. I speak from experience. You know, eventually all of the dry ingredients, oh, the oven has been preheated. Yeah, eventually all of the dry ingredients will fuse together with the wet, and it will actually look like cookie dough. Gotta be patient, and also make sure that you go underneath all of what's in the bowl so that you're not missing any spots. You don't want flaky dough. I'm the only flake here. You know, the dough should not be flaky. Okay, it is coming together rather nicely already. A couple of dry bits, nothing major, but we are definitely getting there. Also, I've never had a problem with over-mixing the dough, quite frankly. I know that with some recipes that can be an issue. However, with this recipe, I've never had that problem. Also, the nice thing about this recipe is that you do not need to wait however many hours for the dough to cool in the fridge and settle. You know, honestly, never had that issue. You know, you can go straight from mixing to the oven. So I'm just going to mix this a little bit more. Make sure that I don't have any dry spots. I think we're good. And let me just check underneath. A couple of little flaky bits. Okay, we are good to go. Very awesome. So another thing that I would very, 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 very much suggest is a little cookie scoop or a melon baller, because that way all of your cookies will be approximately the same size, and you can go for consistency. So just scooch these to the side over here. This little guy has definitely been a tremendous help with my cookie making experience. Oh, I can hardly speak. All right, so then get your cookie sheets ready. Get some parchment paper. And I always do the crinkle first because it helps the parchment paper lay nice and flat. There we go. Okay, so now for every cookie sheet, I like to do roughly 12 cookies. Thereabouts. Just scooch off any extra. So generally I do 3 rows by 4 columns or vice versa. And roughly, like I said, roughly it is about 5 dozen that you end up with. Now, because, yes, 5 dozen is quite a large yield, what you can do, and I have done this and it works beautifully, what you can do is once you are done making however many cookies you do want at the time, what you can do is take the remainder of your dough, ball it up just as I'm doing right now, then pop it in the freezer for 1 to 2 hours or so. And then you're sort of flash freezing the dough for 1 to 2 hours, and then take it out of the freezer, take those frozen balls of cookie dough, put them in a Ziploc, and then you can use them at your leisure. Now, what I would strongly suggest is when you do want to then bake those cookies, use a little bit of foresight and figure out, okay, in a couple of hours, I'm going to want some cookies. That's fine. Take out the frozen balls of dough, put them on the parchment paper, just like we're doing now. Let them defrost for about 1 to 2 hours, and then bake them. Technically, from what I understand, you can go straight from frozen to baking them. However, you would want to start off with a lower temperature and bake them longer. I would much rather let them defrost, quite frankly. Okay, so we have our dozen good to go. Just sort of scooch them a little bit. All right. Now, like I said, my oven has already preheated to 375, and I'm going to put them in for roughly about 12 minutes. Now, depending, of course, on the temperature of your oven, etc., etc., these things have a lot of variables to them. I like to go for about 12 minutes until they just start to get a little bit golden brown. Then I take them out, let them sit on the cookie sheet to get a little bit situated and a little bit settled. Then I transfer them over to a cooling rack. So I'm going to pop these in right now. I just set my timer. Okay, start that timer. Start your engines, folks. Okay, so about 12 minutes, and then I'm going to go through the process, and we are going to have some delicious cookies in just a bit. So I'm going to keep on working on scooping out some more on my other cookie sheet, and we shall continue. Okie dokie. Okay, so the first batch is almost done. Now, like I said, baking times may vary a little bit. I would say make your baseline about 10 minutes and, go based, from there. I went from, 10 minutes, and then I tried 13 minutes. 13 minutes was a little too crispy for me, and then I bumped it down to 12, and that was sort of my little sweet spot as far as the right timing goes. And, yep, they are done. They are good to go. Let's grab them. Please give me one moment. Oh, they look gorgeous. See, just a little bit of color around the edges. They flattened out a little bit, but they're not paper thin. And they are, I can tell, they are going to be absolutely delish. Now let me pop in my second batch, get my timer ready for another 12 minutes. And start. There we go. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to let these sit on the cookie sheet for a couple of minutes, let them get a little bit situated and a little bit settled. Then I'm going to transfer them over to the cooling rack, and then we get to do the tasting, which of course I'm very much anticipating because I love these. And after actually that batch is done baking, I'm going to do a third dozen, and then the rest I'm going to freeze for later. So until that time comes, I'll see you in a bit. All right, so now it is time for my favorite part of these videos, the tasting. And what I did, before I go into that, what I did is I took the remainder of the dough, and like I said, I made my little scoops of dough, put them onto the parchment paper. I made sure that the pan was nice and cool first, and then, still on the parchment paper, popped that into the freezer, and I'm going to let it sit in there for about an hour or two until the balls are nice and firm. Then I'm going to put those in batches into Ziploc bags, and then I can bake them whenever I want to. It's a fabulous thing. And actually, because I made the cookies a little bit smaller, I actually managed to get not only the 5 dozen, I managed to get 6 additional ones as well. So there is, of course, some wiggle room. Now, if you want your cookies bigger, so be it. That's totally fine. But this is based on my experience. So now, the cookies. Yes, can't wait. All right, so let's dive into one of these bad boys. And so, like I was saying earlier, like I personally don't care for really crispy, crunchy cookies like biscotti. I don't like to break my teeth. So, as you can see, it's got some chew, some bend to it, which is fabulous. A little bit of crispness around the edges, but the inside, it's baked, but it's soft, it's chewy, it's delightful. So good. And like I was saying before about the salt, there's like a hint, it's not overt. There is a hint of the salt, which I think brings about the sweetness of the chocolate and the sugars and so forth. Now, of course, there are tons of things that you can do with this recipe, but before I tell you, excuse me, I had to indulge myself because I've got all these sitting in front of me. It's taking a lot of restraint not to go into them at the moment. So this recipe, I would say, is a really great jumping off point for other possibilities. Now, some things that do come to mind, actually, I was just thinking, what if you threw in some trail mix instead of chocolate chips and, so forth? Maybe some trail mix. That could be cool. Or maybe some dried cherries and macadamia nuts. That could be pretty cool. Or another thing is, instead of adding in chocolate chips, what you could do is perhaps, throw in a different kind of add-in, like trail mix, something like that, roughly about a cup still. And then, after they're done baking, then melt some chocolate and then do a drizzle on top. That would be lovely. I don't know. What do you think? Let me know in the comments section. This, I think, is a really nice basis for a chocolate chip cookie, and it is delightful as it is, but of course, it's like a canvas. You can play around with it, sort of like, a traditional sugar cookie. Yes, you can make adjustments. You can play around with the add-ins, and I think that's a fabulous little nuance that you can add to it. So let me know in the comments section down below, do you have a favorite cookie recipe? This one, absolutely love it. There's a little bit of wiggle room for variation, but it's got a really solid foundation, and it is so delicious. And the fact that it makes a really good, solid yield, you can make cookies whenever you want to. Just, freeze them, use a little bit of forethought, defrost them, about an hour or two before you want to bake them. 12 minutes later, you've got yourself some cookies. It's a fabulous thing. So listen, I want to thank you guys for watching today. I hope you liked the video, and if you did, please give a little thumbs up button down below, because you know that I appreciate your appreciation as always. And if there are perhaps some kinds of recipes that you would like me to try, whether it's sweet or savory, let me know in the comments section, and perhaps it'll happen. You never know. And until next time, you know what to do, right? I want all of you to stay inspired, stay caffeinated, stay making fun, fabulous, tasty treats in the kitchen for yourself. Share them with somebody you love. Take care of yourself and, those around you and everything. And listen, you guys have a fabulous, fabulous day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now, everybody, and have a great day.